longue. Les Français parlent aux Français. Voici notre 8e bulletin d'information. Veuillez écouter tout d'abord quelques messages personnels.
September the 3rd, 1939. The Second World War begins with the invasion of Poland. The deep, dark Nazi plague is quickly spreading over all Europe, going from one success to another. Led by an extraordinary statesman, Winston Churchill, and remaining the only bastion of defence, Great Britain is the first nation to stop the Reich forces during a dreadful battle in the air. From all Europe, the free forces gather in this last bastion of freedom. December the 7th, 1941, the war changes as the United States join the Allied nations. Despite the public opinion, which considers Japan as the enemy to eradicate first, Roosevelt prefers Germany first. It is then necessary to get back quickly on European soil in order to make a fighting advance into the heart of Germany. Great Britain is the most appropriate area for launching the operation, but attacking the north coast of Europe means attacking the enemy where he is the most well defended. Hitler has ordered the erection of gigantic defences all along the coast, the Atlantic Wall. During the disastrous attempt of landing at Dieppe in 1942, the wall proved it to be extremely efficient. The Allies therefore learned important lessons from the raid. It is impossible to take a port directly from the front. It is also necessary to take it by surprise and whilst having aerial supremacy. The year 1943 sees the first defeats of the German army. In the east, von Paulus has to capitulate on the February the 2nd at Stalingrad with 100,000 men. In the west, after the defeat inflicted on the Desert Fox at El Alamein in 1942, the German troops finally find themselves expelled from Africa. In July 1943, the Allies are in Sicily and the Italian campaign can start. But at the beginning of 1944, a stalemate is reached. The Russians have to wait for springtime to continue their offensive, and the Anglo-American forces encounter enormous difficulties in their progression in Italy. The only way of changing the course of the war in order to achieve a rapid and decisive victory is to land on the northern coast of Europe. The future of Western Europe therefore depends on the issue of the oncoming battle. Since 1942, the planners have been working on an ambitious scheme. Its major aspects will be accepted by Winston Churchill and Franklin Roosevelt during the Quadrant Conference at Quebec in August 1943 under the code name Overlord.
We shall communicate the secret information of the Quebec Conference to Germany, Italy, and Japan.
The plan consists of the landing in Normandy of an expeditionary force. The mission can be defined as such. Together with the other Allied nations, you shall enter the European continent and undertake operations so as to reach the heart of Germany and destroy its military forces. Due to its weak defences, the coast of Normandy has been chosen. The Cherbourg Peninsula will protect the landing zones from the west winds. From the 3 initial landing sectors, 5 are finally chosen, respectively called Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juno and Sword. The operation is planned for the beginning of May 1944. In order to keep the effect of surprise, a deception plan called Fortitude has been conceived. Commanding non-existent divisions and dummy equipment, Patton makes the Germans believe that the invasion would take place in the Pas-de-Calais. Since March, the Allied air forces are carrying out the systematic bombing of the principal bridges, petrol depots, stations and railways, so as to isolate the northwest of France. At the beginning of springtime 1944, Great Britain is no more than a large platform for men, weapons and material. The men keep on training. General Eisenhower has been appointed to head this gigantic operation. Among his staff, General Montgomery, Admiral Ramsey, General Bradley. The date of the landing is postponed for 1 month. Overlord will take place on 5th, 6th or 7th of June. At the beginning of June, the weather is atrocious. Instead of the 5th, the operation is to take place on the 6th. Now, Operation Neptune, the crossing of the Channel by the Expeditionary Force, can begin. In every major port, the men are embarking. The fleet has to be assembled. The rendezvous takes place in an area called Piccadilly Circus, to the south of Portsmouth. Because of the awful weather forecast, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, commanding the German forces in northwestern France, had gone back to Germany to visit his family. Eisenhower has come to salute the American paratroopers of the 82nd and the 101st Divisions, who are to jump on the western flank of the invasion forces.
Les sanglots longs des violons de l'automne blessent mon cœur d'une langueur monotone.
On 5th of June at around 20 hours 15, by these 2 verses from the French poet Verlaine, the BBC informs the resistance of the imminence of the invasion. Then from dawn on 6th of June, the resistance starts destroying all means of communication and the transportation of reserves towards Normandy is made difficult. At midnight on 5th June, the battle starts on each flank of the landing zone. To the east, on the right bank of the River Orme between Caen and the sea, the 1st British paratroopers and gliders land. The principal objectives are reached on time, thanks to individual initiatives. The Benneville Bridge, Pegasus Bridge, at 00:20. The Merville Battery at about 4 hours 30. On the other side of the invasion area, the paratroopers jump around St. Mère Église, which is liberated early at 00:30. At 02 hours, off the 5 beaches, about 6,000 ships are waiting. Helped by the sailors, the men board the flat barges and other landing ships. The time has come to start the assault. The first American wave reached Utah Beach and Omaha Beach at 06:30 hours. Meanwhile, the first British wave arrived on the 3 beaches at 07:30 hours. The dawn of D-Day is breaking. On both sides of what is to be the invasion zone since 00:15, 18,000 American, Canadian and British paratroopers are fighting against the surprised Germans. is at Utah and Omaha that the first battles are taking place. At Utah, the first troops get on the beach at exactly 0630 hours, 2 kilometers south of the planned area, but without heavy losses. Luckily for the Americans, this sector is not so well defended. Soon, one beachhead is formed and then another, thanks to the engineers. The junction with the 101st Airborne Division is made during the early hours of the day. Omaha, the battle was very tough. While they are still in the water, the soldiers fall under the fire of the automatic weapons. The German defences looked intact. The Liberator aircraft had bombed too far inland. Trapped between the water and the concrete seawall, the American troops count their casualties. Some companies had lost nearly 70% of their men. The Americans were pinned down on the beach until midday. Inside the German bunkers, the ammunition is running short. At last, at 12:30, some breaches had been opened. Verville is taken. As night falls, short of reinforcements because of the Allied aerial superiority, the German soldiers surrender. Between Omaha and Utah, at the top of La Pointe de Hoc, a 13-meter high sharp cliff, the guns in the concrete shelters jeopardized the landings along the Omaha beach. The Rangers were given the mission to take the battery. They managed to capture La Pointe de Hoc by scaling the cliffs, using fire ladders attached to the landing crafts and rocket-fired grapnels. Unfortunately, the Rangers had to fight off German counterattacks until 8th of June before being relieved. On Sword Beach, between Hermanville and Weestrum, there is little resistance. The landing operation is carried out methodically. The special tanks quickly open breaches, and from 0930 hours the progression inland can start. The British armoured divisions arrived 6 kilometres from Caen at about 1600 hours, but there the 21st Panzer Division stopped them. In the meantime, the 177th French Fusiliers, led by Commandant Kiefer, have succeeded in cleaning up the casino at Ouistreham. At Juno, Corsair-sur-Mer, the 3rd Canadian Division has landed, and there too the special tanks are extremely effective. At about 9:30 hours, Bagneres-sur-Mer is captured. The Canadians can now continue south. At the centre of the landing zone, Gold Beach is surrounded by steep cliffs. The British 50th Northumberland Division progressed rapidly and destroyed bunkers and other German obstacles. At the end of the morning, several breaches were opened, and the British troops can capture Crier and Arromanches, where an enormous artificial harbour is to be installed. Although the towns of Bayeux and Caen were still resisting, the Allies had established a solid beachhead on the Normandy coast by the end of D-Day. On 7th of June, Bayeux is the first liberated French town. Fortitude remained, and the Germans were still believing that the invasion will come in the Pas-de-Calais area. To allow supplies to the troops, 2 artificial harbours were installed rather quickly. The success of the whole operation depended on them. One thing is to step on the continent, another is to keep progressing on it. The supply of troops has an important part to play. The first harbour must be assembled off Omaha Beach, the other off Arromanches. With artificial breakwaters made with sunken ships and huge concrete casings called Phoenix, with unloading platforms linked to the shore by floating roadways, working 24 hours a day, the synthetic harbours represent a human engineering feat comparable today with the construction of the Channel Tunnel. These ports were constructed in pieces in 8 months in Great Britain and towed across the Channel on D-Day +1. Unfortunately, an extremely violent storm destroyed the American harbour before it was completed. The port of Arromanches had to fulfil its duty far more than expected until December 1944. Apart from the German defences, the thick groves and the roads were too narrow for the tanks. 1 week after their landing, the Allies enlarged the beachhead and joined the different beaches together, having control of 100 kilometres of coast. The Americans continued their way about 20 kilometres towards Saint-Lô, but Caen still is not taken. Once they had cut off the Cherbourg Peninsula on 18th of June, commanded by General Bradley, the Americans arrived at Cherbourg, which falls on the 27th. But the harbour has been destroyed by the Germans, and the works to put it back in service will last for several weeks. For the capture of Caen, the British troops are involved in furious battles. The centre of the town is finally reached on the 9th of July. Therefore, the British held a major part of the German troops around Caen. After the capture of Saint-Lô, Patton launched Operation Cobra with the 3rd American Army. On the 31st of July, the front is broken near Avranches. The access to Brittany is open. On the 6th of August, Hitler gave orders for a counter-attack towards Mortain, so as to occupy the route chosen by the Americans. This offensive is a failure, and the Germans are finally caught in the pinches. To the north, the Canadians attack in the direction of Falaise. The Americans of Patton arrive to the south. On the 19th of August, the trap of Falaise is closed. During the Battle of Normandy, 240,000 Germans were killed and 210,000 were captured. The closing of the Falaise Gap meant the end of the Battle of Normandy. The road is now open towards the Seine and Paris.